Well, hello everyone. Again, my name is Shane, and I am here to talk about a lot of different subjects. My video podcast series is called Way of Being. The reason why it's called Way of Being is because people can do a lot of things, and sometimes the doing is less important than how we're being behind our doing. In fact, it's always more important. Um, we lose sight of that. I lose sight of that. So I wanted my entire video podcast series to be called Way of Being, to kind of keep us focused on way of being all the time. Um, it informs our doings, and we learn in certain ways to improve our doings, and we learn in other ways to improve our way of being while doing. So I talk about that a lot. And my hope is that over time we can all kind of explore different concepts having to do with way of being in terms of how to help people who are younger than ourselves. So most of what I talk about is the role of somebody who is there to help younger people, young adults, teenagers, whether you are parents or work in a treatment program of some kind, or a coach, or a teacher, high school, or anybody that is in a role of trying to help other people in their lives. So today I want to talk about something that has been important to me for a long time. I put together this general idea in terms of sort of training it to others and setting it into practice in treatment settings many years ago. Had sort of different names along the way, and it's evolved along the way. It is called engaging agency. What is engaging agency? It is helping another person want to be different, not just getting them to change their behavior. So I even heard it the other day from a dad. We were exploring different ways to try to help our kids, our sons, daughters, and this dad said, if I could find a way to engage him, talking about his son, that things would get better. That's really tough to do sometimes. It's people are so different. People's personalities are so different. It's sometimes it's difficult to engage them, engage the students in our class, or engage the students out in the wilderness, or engage our own children. But there are general sort of guidelines that if we can get a handle on those, we will be far better of an engager of another person's agency than not. So in order to get through all of the concept of what it means to engage another person's agency, I want to define what agency is and define what engaging is, or what is being an engager, as opposed to a provoker. You'll see me flipping through the pages of this book. This is actually the training manual that I use training staff, or also the folks that it's not always me, other people train our staff on these ideas. I put together these ideas, like I said, and it's in this training manual. But it's applicable to all sorts of settings, Sunday school even, actually. So engaging agency. Well, first of all, why actually would we even care to engage agency as opposed to just get somebody to behave? If you're wondering, wait a minute, engaging agency, why would that be important? Then just keep listening, please. Human beings do not like to be forced, especially young human beings. We all know 2-year-olds don't like being forced what to do, but even, when kids get older, even though they might not throw a 2-year-old fit, they still don't want to be forced. None of us want to be forced. It's against human nature to be forced to do things. So becoming engaged then is a way to helping somebody become engaged is a way to point them in the right direction, but their own motives now become at play to continue moving in that right direction. So engaging agency. There's several parts to this. Agency. Agency, the way I define it, is the ability that a person has to choose their way of being. Sometimes agency is defined as the ability to choose between right and wrong, or the ability to do anything, the ability to do what I want to do. We have found throughout history that if you define agency as doing what one wants, often that's not even possible. There is a book I highly recommend if you have not read it. It's a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I read this book when I was in high school and blew my mind, touched my heart. I cried all day long while reading it, and when I was finished with it, it's a true story of a man, Viktor Frankl, who lived during the time of the Second World War. He was a Jewish man and lived in a concentration camp. His family was killed. He was a psychologist during this, before the war broke out, and during this entire process, he kind of analyzed, some people, even under those horrible circumstances, look to the meaning of their life, what they can contribute to life, as opposed to not. Another way of stating that could be that some people exercise their agency in such a way that they remain human during such an experience, and others don't. I don't know what I would do if I was in a situation like that, but certainly Viktor Frankl gives us a good example and a good idea of this idea that I can exercise my agency to choose my way of being regardless of what my circumstances are, even if I am in a concentration camp of some kind. It's a really good book. Okay, so agency, a person's ability to choose their way of being at any given time. And that then informs behavior. So if we want to help somebody and we want to help them in terms of them changing their behavior, or just behaving, we can be either a provoker or we can be an engager. A provoker is someone who just seeks to control the whole thing. So we want that person's behavior to change, and so we will set up circumstances or parameters wherein they will comply. That usually has to do with creating something they don't like that'll happen to them if they don't behave the way we want them to, or setting things up where they will like what we may have to offer so that they'll do what we ask them to do. So rewards and punishments, carrots and stick. You all know about that. There are numbers of bodies of work around this idea of the efficacy of getting somebody to change their behavior through behavioral means. My experience is that when you try to exert from external to get somebody's behavior to change solely without adding some of these other pieces, trying to engage their agency, they resist it. Now, they might comply, but that doesn't mean that they're not resisting being forced to change. Some people, fine, they don't want the punishment, or they're great with the reward, and so they'll change their behavior. Doesn't mean they wanted to. There's a really great story of a woman who had her 4-year-old daughter in the shopping cart, and she's going down the aisle, and this girl keeps pulling stuff off the shelves and her mom is saying, stop it, and finally, and she's not. So finally, her mom takes her to the end of the aisle and sits her on a bunch of cans or something on display. Says, "You sit here while I go down this aisle and buy what I need to buy. You sit there," and just kind of plopped her down on these cans. And the little girl said to her mom, "I'll sit here, but I'll be standing up on the inside." So, how many of us in our lives have complied but while standing up on the inside? So, outward compliance in terms of behavior doesn't mean that the person that we're working with wanted to do that particular thing. They're just complying. And if our goal is to just get somebody to comply, fine. You can just don't worry about listening to the rest of this video podcast. But our hope is that these young people will find a reason to want to do what is appropriate and right long after the parameters that we have set around them are gone. So, engaging agency. It's more difficult, it's a little more messy, you have to be more patient, and it's far longer lasting. So, I can either be an engager of another person's agency, or I can be a provoker, meaning I'm just focused on their behavior. It's annoying to everyone to just have their behavior paid attention to. In the treatment world, there's this thing called a level system, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Depends on how it's put together and sort of carried out. But the general idea is, if you behave the way we want you to, you go up in levels, and those come with privileges, or they come with things that the student might want, ability to call their parents, or to have home visits, or certain things. And sometimes going up in level makes sense because as somebody progresses, they are demonstrating that they're more trustworthy and that sort of thing. But often it's just a way to get everybody to just behave. And they're often separate from the treatment plan as well. So it causes this difficulty. Here I'm just interested in somebody's behavior to comply with what we have set up. And over here is their actual treatment plan. And there's a numerous diagnoses going on with all these kiddos. But all of them have the exact same level system to work through. And all the while, unless the people who are getting them to work through that level system are specifically trained to be engagers and not provokers, they will default into provoke land all day long. And it's automatons trying to just train younger automatons at that point. It's kind of messed up. So that's why this is such an important topic, and I'm talking about it today. So part of being an engager is reducing the resistance of the person that you're working with by not being a provoker. So we're going to go through pieces of being an engager. Some of the main things that you want. There's certain qualities you have to have in order to be an engager. I'll summarize them now. You have to prepare yourself. You have to be an example both inwardly and outwardly. You have to love those you're trying to help. You have to be interested in them as an individual. Remain unoffended. Create fun. Capture curiosity. And then also interject yourself, but meaningfully. Interject yourself meaningfully. So let's talk about the first thing. So preparing yourself. There are three pieces to this this particular subject, the subject of preparing yourself, oneself. So there's a quote by a man named Albert Einstein, if you've heard of him. Ideas, come into being not through demonstration, but through revelation, through the medium of powerful personalities. So we're trying to get kiddos that we're working with, including our own children, to have ideas, to learn. And Albert Einstein talks about this concept of being a powerful personality. Powerful personalities get things done in the lives of other people. Now, here's the thing. Who are these mysterious people who have powerful personalities? Well, in my opinion, every single one of us have powerful personalities. Or at least we have pieces of a powerful personality inside of us that may or may not have materialized or come out yet. But everybody has the potential to be one that could be described as having a powerful personality, an influential personality. Anybody can do that, especially if that's your intent, that's the direction you're trying to go. Influence somebody powerfully because of influence as opposed to control, powerful personality. Some of the ways that we can have a powerful personality is really lean into who we are. Figure out who you are. What are you interested in? What are you passionate about? When you demonstrate your passion and you're around children, that becomes a powerful thing. When you let go of fears that you have, face them, it's a powerful thing. So each one of us can explore our creativity, can explore those aspects of ourselves that we like, can get into things that we're interested in. You just take yourself, name something that you're interested in. That thing can become the medium wherein somebody can be engaged. I've done training several times where I just ask people, what's your hobby? They tell me what their hobby is, doesn't matter what it is. And then we work through how that could be something that could engage another human being. That thing doesn't have to become that other human being's, major interest or hobby, but the fact that you're so engaged into it and excited about it makes it to where now they're intrigued even just by that dynamic alone. So, powerful personality. Make that piece of yourself that's powerful come to the fore. Believe it. Believe in you. Cultivate humility. Friedrich Nietzsche, however that's pronounced. One often contradicts an opinion when what is uncongenial is really the tone in which it was conveyed. So he was a philosopher. He probably argued opinions a lot. And basically says, look, we get contradicted when it's our tone that somebody finds uncongenial, not necessarily the content of our argument. So cultivate humility if you're a leader. If you are, again, a field staff, a parent, the leader, the teacher that says this phrase, respect your elders. This might be unpopular, what I'm about to say to a lot of people is hogwash. Young people are not obligated to respect their elders just because somebody's older than them. Children are not obligated to respect anybody just because that person is older than them or that person is in some sort of authority position. That was never sort of a true principle, but it was definitely something that a lot of us have lived with growing up. It's a little bit not so much now as it used to be, but oh my gosh, adults are to be respected regardless of what they do or how they do it. So don't do that. If you're an authority figure or a parent, demand your children respect you. You have to earn it. Our children have to earn things. We have to earn things too. We're dealing with human beings. So how can I cultivate humility? How can I be the sort of person who understands that my tone matters, that my position, my body language, while I am interacting with somebody that I'm in charge of, matters? We need to be the valley that the river runs to. And sometimes that means physically being lower than them. Get down to where they are. If a kid is in the dirt working on a bow drill fire, it's a fire you make from sticks, and it happens a lot in wilderness therapy. I can either stand over them and give them instructions and give them pointers, or I can be down with them, giving them pointers and instructions. If you're the executive director of a wilderness program, for example, and you happen to go out and visit a group, and somebody's sort of struggling on, washing their cooking device, their cooking pot, show them how to do it expeditiously by doing it. It blows their mind. Why on earth is the executive director washing my pot? It doesn't seem right. It's a very powerful thing. That's just an example. It's a powerful thing. Cultivate humility. It doesn't mean you're losing power, by the way. Powerful personalities don't just seek to control and command. They do so with humility. Abraham Lincoln comes to mind. Okay. Be willing to let go and therefore willing to learn that which is necessary. So the 3 parts of prepare yourself: be a powerful personality, cultivate humility, and be willing to let go. I actually did a whole video podcast about that. I have another series called, it's about my book, The Way with Children. This series is called Way of Being. The other one is Way with Children. And in that, I talk about this idea of letting go, of unlearning. So what is it that one needs to let go of? So here's a quote by Thomas Zaz. Every act of conscious learning requires the willingness to suffer an injury to one's self-esteem. That is why young children, before they are aware of their own self-importance, learn so easily. It's amazing. Maybe we don't learn because we think we know. There's all these blocks to us learning. Little kids learn because they're not ego-driven yet. They're not self-important yet. So, if you want to be an engager and not a provoker, figure out what you need to let go of, along with what you need to pick up. So, prepare yourself. That's part of prepare yourself. Be an example. There's 2 pieces to being an example if you want to be an engager. An inner example and an outward example. Leo Tolstoy says this: hypocrisy in anything whatever may deceive the cleverest and most penetrating man, but the least wide awake of children recognizes it and is revolted by it, however ingeniously it may be disguised. What? Young people can smell a hypocrite from 18.7 miles away, at least. So, being an example is hard, actually, because you're wanting to control your own behavior. You're wanting to be someone who acts the way you know you ought to be acting all the time. Not just when you're in front of your clients, your children, your students, your patients, all the time. If I am a wilderness instructor, for example, and for my whole rotation, I talk to kiddos about addiction and, how to get over things. I'm not going to be very effective at it, but I may sort of talk about it because it's part of my job. But then on my rotation off, I get fall down drunk, sort of almost whenever I can. Children can feel that through how you react to things. They can feel it by your inflection. They can just feel it. So if I am to be an engager of other human beings, my example to them needs to come from a genuine place and an internal place. So the outward example, Gandhi says, be the change you hope to see in others. We've all heard that one. Let them see your change. Let them see your let them see the outward manifestations of that inner example that I just got through talking about. Again, not in a prideful way. You're cultivating humility too. Mark Twain said, "Few things are harder to put up with than a good example." Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "What you do speaks so loud that I cannot hear what you say." Carlos Santana said, "There is nothing more contagious on this planet than enthusiasm." So you have four people who are making it quite obvious that what we do on the outside is something that young people watch, and it has influence. My granddaughter, who is a year and a month, will kind of bend down at speakers and try to tell them what to do, these speakers, because she has seen her mom and her dad talk to Alexa, the little speaker. And so she's telling speakers or different items, what to do in her little 1-year-old language. It doesn't, these random things aren't changing the song or anything like that, but she sees it. So the inward example is my inside genuineness. The outward example is what they're actually seeing me physically do while I'm on the trail, or while I'm on the job, or while I am being the coach or interacting with those whom I am hoping to have influence with or hoping to lead. Okay. Here's the next section. You gotta love them. I'm not going to pronounce this right, but Thich Nhat Hanh says, "The most precious gift we can offer others is our presence. When mindfulness embraces those we love, they will bloom like flowers." There are times when I'm good at this, and there's times when I suck at this. Of my presence being around mindfully people in such a way that they will bloom. That they just feel my love for them. It is often sort of not seen as professional to talk in this way, by the way. Now you can say unconditional regard. That's okay to say. That's professional. Or you can just understand and buy the concept that you have to love these kids. It's where it starts. There is a long time, 50-year study. They figured out that regardless of the methodology that one uses, the relationship between the practitioner and the client is the most robust indicator of therapeutic success. You gotta love them. You gotta love them regardless of who they are, how they are, what they're doing. Albert Einstein said, "It is the theory that decides what can be observed." Now, if that statement intrigues you a little bit, about 5 video podcasts ago, my whole presentation was about that idea right there, having to do with Albert Einstein and a colleague of his. So you can look back at some of my other presentations and look for the mention of Albert Einstein in the title. It is important to know that it all starts with our theory. If our theory is this kid is lovable, then we will be able to observe someone in a loving way, and they will feel it. If our theory is, oh my gosh, this is going on again, then we kind of lose them before we've even started. So that is that, love them. So after the subject of love them is be interested and show it. People like people to be interested in them, interested in what they have to say. So learn who they are. Learn who the kiddos are. Ask enough about them that you know about their life. You knowing about their life is part of the reason why you're doing this, so you can relate better or whatever. But that's just a piece of it. The other piece of it is that they're feeling you being interested in them. So you remembering the details about what they've told you, that'd be great. But it's just being interested that's important. So be interested and show it. Alice Miller says, learning is a result of listening, which in turn leads to even better listening and attentiveness to the other person. In other words, to learn from the child, we must have empathy, and empathy grows as we learn. So, seek to get a feel for where they're coming from. And you can't do that unless you ask a lot of questions and get to know them. And that process of getting to know them, they appreciate. Seek their views and opinions. So these are the two parts of be interested and show it. Learn who they are, seek their views and opinions. It is revelatory when you sit down and ask clients to give you feedback as a therapist, as a cook that works at a residential program, as a psych tech, as a coach, as a teacher. How many times did one of your high school teachers say, hey class, give me a little bit of feedback about how I'm doing as a teacher? That never happened to me during my high school years. Sometimes it happens in the college arena. Sometimes there's mechanisms around that. But people who are in charge of children often don't care what those recipients of their authority view them. And sometimes they care, but not enough to ask. So there's a style of group called a Milan group. And it's where, there's probably different versions of it, but in wilderness therapy, it often happens that you have the staff and the students that are out in the field, and then you have the new rotation of staff coming in. So it's set up wherein the new rotation of staff coming in sits and talks with the old rotation that's been there. And the children, the clients, sit around in a circle, and they listen to this exchange. They listen to themselves being talked about and reported about. So these staff talk about all the kiddos, and these staff listen and ask questions. And they're all talking right in front of the kids. And there's rules typically put around this where the kids can't say anything. They can't, make gestures or noises or, I didn't do that, nothing like that. They're supposed to just sit and listen. So this was at a program that I didn't design. I was just working at the time, many years ago, 20 some odd years ago. And I was with the boys, and the new staff were coming. They were going to arrive in like 2 hours, something like that. And one of the kids is kind of rolling his eyes like, oh, great, the Milan is coming. And I said, well, what do you mean? What is... I wasn't too familiar with it at the time, by the way, but he explained it, but also explained his distaste for it. And I'm like, well, why do you not like it? And he's like, well, because you sit there and you listen, they're talking about you. And so, well, are they wrong? Are they often inaccurate when they're talking about you? Well, not necessarily, but it's just kind of... Anyway, he had some complaints. So it occurred to me that nobody had done a reverse Milan. So I said to the boys, look, me and the two other staff are going to sit on the outside of the circle. Half of you pretend like you are just coming into the group, and that the other half are talking about your staff, how they're doing, what they could work on, assignments that might be good to give them, whatever, and then switch spots. The other half of you can now act like the one that's been there for a while, reporting to the new ones coming in. So do exactly the same thing as what you experience as the recipient of a Milan group. And we'll sit on the outside, and we'll have the same rules. We can't disagree. We can't clear our throat interruptingly. We can't do anything. And we'll listen. And the boys, first of all, didn't believe that we would actually do it, but then we did it. And they at first were sort of, joking about it and kind of taking advantage of the scenario and, poking fun a little bit. They're a bunch of jerks or whatever. But then they got actually really quite serious and, I dare say, professional. I took notes. It was good information, and they were sincerely wanted to communicate to us what we did good, what we could work on. It was pretty cool, actually, and the other staff liked it too. I don't know if it was the single time that these boys or anybody in that program had ever experienced a reverse Milan group. There's other times where you just sit a student down and like, how am I doing? At the end of every rotation, or at the end of a shift, at the end of maybe at the end of a month, of teaching at a high school, you can just sort of have a minute and say, hey, kiddos, I would like you to give me feedback about how I'm doing. It's pretty amazing what we can learn. And by the way, we've been cultivating humility, so that would mean that these kiddos are probably open to giving you feedback because they don't think that there's going to be retribution or that kind of thing, because you're also cultivating humility. You're also being a powerful personality. You're trying to get feedback, intelligence from them. Okay, the other aspect of being an engager is remaining unoffended. Honoré de Balzac, I don't know how to pronounce that name either, but anyway, says this: the more one judges, the less one loves. So there you go. The more we judge, the more we, in other ways, are offended at what people do, the less we can love them. Remain unoffended. The concept of being offendable or being offended can be an entirely different presentation, video podcast, and I'll do that as well. So remaining unoffended is kind of tricky. It entails a lot of work. It entails a lot of things. Some people are offended at particular things while other people aren't, and then it's reversed as well. So that implies that some things aren't in and of themselves offensive. So if I have the ability to not take offense at something that somebody else does, and vice versa, then it means that taking offense is something that I am doing. So I'm participating in this sort of double event, something that's done that might be offensive, and then taking offense. There's a lot to unpack on that subject of taking offense, but for the purposes of engaging agency, this idea of remaining unoffended, the importance of that cannot be overstated. I will be engaging of somebody's agency if I am not offended about what they do. Their language, their behavior, their disrespect, their disobedience, their uncooperativeness, their not listeningness, all of that. We don't know what another person's struggle is. Before high-functioning autism was well understood, people were just frustrated that this kid wasn't listening very well. Pay attention. I told you to do this, then that, and then that other thing, and you only did the first thing. What's your problem? You weren't listening. Well, no, they can't even track past a certain number of instructions. And if we're offended by that, then we're being a provoker now. And we're going in reverse. We're not engaging anything. So if you cannot handle their behavior while you're trying to help them modify it for their good, and you're offended by the things that they do, they obviously will know it, and it will reverse your efforts to engage them, and it will also it will give them the feeling that all you're interested in is that they behave in certain ways. And so then again, like I mentioned before, they'll just comply maliciously, standing up on the inside, or they will rebel. It becomes like this dance that we all know, that we've all seen, that's painful. So it helps to remain unoffended. Even at language, simple stuff. You are better positioned to help somebody modify behavior that you don't even like if your focus is, well, their life would be better if they didn't do that particular thing. I don't want them to stop doing that particular thing because it offends me. I've asked in forums, groups of therapists, groups of practitioners in this business, how often, or raise your hand if you have consequenced a client while being perfectly serene emotionally, and not a single hand went up. Then I ask, raise your hand if you tend to consequence clients, even logical consequencing of clients, right after they do something that bothers you. And all these hands go up. Or during a time when you are emoting, probably because they did something that is, troublesome or something like that to you emotionally. A lot of hands go up. We're far more likely to consequence children when we are emotionally wrapped up in what it is that they just did, when we're offended, when we're upset, when we're hurt, when we're angered at whatever it is that or when we're embarrassed by what it is that they just did. Then consequences happen. And by the way, when are we most logical? When we are upset or when we're serene and unoffended? Is it okay to consequence children? Yeah, I'm not saying it's not, but not while we are wrapped up emotionally. We are not logical beings at that point. So we cannot logically consequence anybody in any way while we're offended. So even doing behavioral type things is more legitimate and more powerful and more appropriate when we're not offended. So, remaining unoffended. It's hard, but it's a huge piece, one of the bigger pieces of this idea of engaging agency. All right, create fun. Leo Buscaglia. I think I've suggested this before. If you don't know who that is, Google him, read everything that he has written. Leo Buscaglia. It is paradoxical that many educators and parents still differentiate between a time for learning and a time for play without seeing the vital connection between them. Create fun. Make something interesting. Make a game of it. It's not all that hard when that becomes your intention, by the way. Plato. You can discover more about a person in an hour of play than in a year of conversation. Now, I don't think this guy played around with words very much. I also think that he was very intentional about the words that he said. That's a very succinct thing. You can discover more in an hour of play than in a year of conversation. Why is that? How is that? Think about it. It's probably what Plato is hoping. We just think about it. Or hoping. Anyway. Joseph Chilton Pearce says, play is the only way the highest intelligence of humankind can unfold. What? Only way the highest intelligence of humankind can unfold. If you are in authority and you don't play in some way with the people you have authority over, please figure out how valuable it is and change that part of what you do. Even if you're the executive director of a program, play games. Figure out how to teach in a way that's playful. Get them to be childlike. I've talked about that as well in another presentation having to do with ray guns. So go watch that video podcast, ray guns. Okay. Capture curiosity. Albert Einstein again. This is one of my favorite quotes of anybody. It is nothing short of a miracle that the modern methods of instructions have not yet entirely strangled the holy curiosity of inquiry. For this delicate little plant, aside from stimulation, stands mainly in need of freedom. Without this, it goes to wreck and ruin without fail. It is a very grave mistake to think that the enjoyment of seeing and searching can be promoted by means of coercion and a sense of duty. Albert Einstein. Get this done. Get this assignment done. If you want the right grade, you better get the... Everything that we do to operate in the world of academics or in the world of behavior management, get these kids to do it by means of coercion or a sense of duty of some kind, or a variation of those things, will strangle their curiosity, strangle them wanting to be an inquirer of life. Albert Einstein is saying this, and I believe him. We can. Well, there's a time I did it on accident. Actually, I wanted to make a flute. I had never made a flute, and I was out in the wilderness, and I had a little schematic, and I was looking around. I think I've said this in another podcast. Anyway, I was looking around, trying to find a piece that would work to make a flute out of, and there's this kid down by the fire. He said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to make a flute." "What? What do you mean?" "I'm going to make a flute. I've got this little drawing of it." He said, "Oh, you're not going to do that without me." He wanted to make the flute. And by the end of that week, he was playing Smoke on the Water, and he was also willing to do whatever I asked. I had captured his curiosity. In that particular time, not even on purpose. But I learned that there are many ways in a wilderness therapy setting where you can capture their curiosity. Many ways in an academic setting, many ways in a parental setting as well. Capture them. What can I do to their natural, holy curiosity, as Einstein puts it? How can I capture that? Not just expect them to behave. All right. Interject yourself meaningfully. We as authority figures interject ourselves all the time. It usually has to do with controlling behavior in one fashion or another. But do we interject ourselves meaningfully? Is the way that our program is set up, is the way that our parenting is set up, is the way that how we do things in the classroom set up, where our interjections have substance. Skinner, B.F. Skinner, he's famous for creating experiments wherein he gets animals to do a lot of different things. Trade pigeons how to guide missiles. All sorts of amazing things. But what is often not mentioned about him is that his powers of observation were insane. So part of interjecting yourself meaningfully is to observe carefully. He observed such minute nuances of behavior in these animals in order to give them rewards in a timely fashion based on whatever it is that they did, was so acute that was the power of what he was doing with these creatures. It was immediate feedback. Boom. So they learned to associate and do what he was wanting to get them to do. The treatment world often takes what B.F. Skinner has done in sort of this very almost haphazard way. Well, he did a lot of experiments and proved that the carrot and stick works. Well, you have to be an amazing observer to even know when and how to do that, to consequence at the right time or to reward at the right time. So when to interject ourselves meaningfully, we have to be watching, we have to be noticing what it is that they're doing so that we can say, hey, what's going on? Hey, why is it that you subtly sort of gave this other kid that look? What is that look all about? Let's talk about that look. What are you doing? I mean, really, the observance piece is so important, not just the interjecting. Often we will be so late in what it is that we're interjecting with in terms of a kid's behavior that we're way past being pertinent to what it was that they did. And it also may be that they've interacted with another kid and that kid's part of it. The whole thing is gone. We weren't observant enough to do it right. Okay, get into their space. Be right in the middle of your kiddos if you're wanting to help them with their behavior. If you're wanting to help them change, if you're wanting them to grow, you need to get in their space, not expect them to just come to you in your space. Don't let things slide by. You're in their space watching carefully. Now, lastly, part of this idea of interject yourself meaningfully is what you're focusing on is their way of being, not just their behavior. So when you sit them down and talk to them, you're talking to them about what's going on inside of them, not just what they did or didn't do. Okay. Whew. There's obviously a lot more to say about all these things, but I will summarize again. To engage somebody's agency, you have to prepare yourself, be an example, both inwardly and outwardly, love those you're trying to help, be interested in them as individuals, and seek feedback from them, remain unoffended, create fun, capture curiosity, and interject yourself meaningfully. It is important to be an engager of another human being's agency in such a way wherein they want to do what they know is the right thing to do, not just behave, or not just comply as well. So, good luck with becoming an engager of agency. Please subscribe if you haven't to my little channel there, and look at my other podcasts. They may fill in some blanks and sort of back up what I'm saying on this one. And until next time, engage away.